Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesday celebrating women in research. So just again, a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. Please make sure your microphone is muted. This will be streamed live to Facebook and will be recorded. So again, feel free to turn off that camera if you'd like. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please type them into the chat box. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can use the comments feature to type any questions into the comments box. This webinar Wednesday is part of a cancer education series that is brought to you by the University of Chicago Comprehensive Cancer Center, Office of Community Engagement and Cancer Health Equity. We are the community outreach arm of the Cancer Center, trying to link the fantastic work of all of our cancer investigators to the larger communities that we serve. And today's webinar is an example of that, as we're going to highlight some of our investigators today. So here is our brief agenda. Actually, I'm gonna X out of this because we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We're going to start today, and I'm gonna stop sharing. Oh no, you know what? Before we even get into our panel or our presenters from the American Cancer Society, I want to do just a really brief overview of International Women's Day, just taking a quick look at some of the history behind it. And of course, I found a YouTube video that can explain it better than I could. So let me pull, oops, I stopped sharing my screen. Let me pull that up really quickly here. Okay, so can you all see this screen okay?
Yes.
You know what, I'm gonna take my headphones off because I always have sound problems when I show videos with my headphones.
It's not full screen yet though.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is a typo in the video, which kind of drives me crazy. So just know that I'm aware of it. Okay.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
Don't be afraid. Be focused. Be determined. Be hopeful. Being your first lady has been the greatest honor of my life, and I hope I've made you proud.
They thought that the bullet would silence us, but they failed.
The new day is on the horizon.
Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning.
Okay. Throw my headphones back on. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you. Mm-hmm.
So, Jane said that was so powerful. Who's chopping onions? So yeah, that's so funny, Jane, because I kind of teared up when I watched that a little bit too. And I'm not, I don't know, I'm not normally someone that would tear up from a video like that. But what I loved about that video is it just showcased how international and intersectional the movement can be for women's rights. And we saw how it started with real basic things like labor conditions and voting rights and things that we, sometimes take for granted now as women, but it also acknowledges that there's still a lot of work to do. And so, so we wanted to hold this panel just kind of in recognition of International Women's Day, which was on Monday, and March is also Women's History Month. In that light, I am going to throw it to Ms. Karina Ogawa, who is here representing the American Cancer Society. And Karina, you should be a co-host. You should be able to share your screen. If you're having any trouble with that.
Yep. Let me see if I can do that right now.
Great. Yep, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Let me just start our slides here. So thank you so much for letting me come speak today about Research Hers and the American Cancer Society. We actually have an exciting partnership with the University of Chicago Medicine that has been longstanding, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the SHE program in a little bit. So we're excited to be able to do that this year. So like I said, Karina Ogawa, I work as a Senior Development Manager at the American Cancer Society this year, focusing on our Research Hers program. So the American Cancer Society, our mission is to be the global leader in the fight against cancer. Now, the word global leader sounds like a pretty big mission to have, but the burden of cancer is equally as big. So 1 in 3 Americans will get a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. This year alone, more than 1.8 million new cases are expected to appear. COVID-19 is going to be playing a pretty big role in that, in the severity of the cases that are detected because people have skipped or postponed their screening. So this is a PSA to get back to screening and make sure you're visiting your doctor. So at ACS, a lot of people know us for our research, but we are actually so much more than that. We're providing programs and support to patients and their families. But research is a pretty big thing that we do, and it's going to be playing a pretty key role in how we find the causes and cures for cancer. ACS has been a major player in breakthroughs in cancer research over the last 100 years. And on the screen here, and on this slide, you'll see some of the breakthroughs that we've been a part of. Most notable, and something that I'm most proud of, is the fact that we've funded the most Nobel laureates at some point in their career. So we've actually funded 49 Nobel laureates that have been funded by ACS. Fun fact is that none of them are women, so we're actually really trying to change that. So now we introduce Researchers, Women Fighting Cancer, which is an initiative that's in their 3rd year, developed in our Chicago market. Very excited to be doing this again this year. So what is Research Hers? Research Hers gives influential women in the community the opportunity to help raise funds for some of the country's most exciting cancer research projects that are funded by women. So simply put, it's women funding women-led cancer research, which is really exciting. Women, as we all know, bring a diverse and unique perspective to cancer research. They make invaluable contributions and discoveries. However, as most of you are aware or know, women are continuously unrepresented in research leadership, and we really want to change that. So we want to make sure that we're building and we're able to grow the pipeline of women who are in this field. So why women researchers? You know, we touched on that a little bit, but we know that this is a hard field to get into. It's a hard field to stay in. So we want to make sure we're doing our part as the American Cancer Society, not only to fund women researchers, but to also build that pipeline and really invest in the future generation of cancer researchers and women. So I do want to talk about our SHE program, the Summer Healthcare Education and Oncology program. That's we're going to be, ACS and University of Chicago Medicine are going to be partnering together this year. So Summer Healthcare Education, or the SHE program, and oncology, led by cancer centers in partnership with the American Cancer Society. So Dr. Kathy Goss, who is leaving University of Chicago Medicine, coming over to the American Cancer Society next month, has been so one of the champions for this project. The SHE and Oncology project is a 2-week virtual program, virtually obviously because of COVID, that introduces high schoolers, both juniors and seniors who identify as female, to a wide range of cancer-related career experiences in the oncology world. So research, clinical care, survivorship, community engagement are the focus areas for this 2-week virtual program. So it's not only just University of Chicago Medicine. University of Texas, Austin, which is actually where this program was started, will be taking part in the SHE and Oncology program again this year, as well as the University of Chicago Medicine, University of Kentucky, University of Pennsylvania, and the University of Michigan. You can see the details on the slide about what the program entails, but we're really excited because with the researchers program within the American Cancer Society, we talk about funding women research, and we do that, but we also talk about investing in and inspiring the next generation of cancer researchers. And this is exactly how we're doing it through the SHE program. So all of our ambassadors who are raising money through the Research Hers program, some of the money this year is going to be going to fund these SHE programs this year. So we're really excited, and we're equally excited to work with great partners such as University of Chicago Medicine. And then I do have a video. I wasn't able to link it, so maybe I can send it out and it can be in the follow-up notes, but just wanted to say thank you so much again for everything that you guys all do. Are excited for the 3rd year of researchers. And if you guys have any questions about the program, happy to answer those. But I think that's all for me.
Great, thank you so much, Karina. So I had a question about, if you are not a cancer researcher or, but this is just something that you support, is there a way for like normal everyday people to say, this is something that I find really interesting that I think is, should be supported? How can we get involved or support this initiative? Yeah,
so our Research Hers ambassadors, ambassadors that are raising $2,500 a year for this program. Actually, a lot of them are not in the cancer field, are not scientists, but they're people who are excited about women funding women research. They're excited about women empowerment, and they want to do their part. So we actually have a lot of ambassadors who are not in the STEM field, but are excited and want to get involved. So I guess short answer to that question is anybody can get involved. And if you're wanting more information, I will drop my email in the chat, and you can definitely reach out to me. We can set up some time and get some more information.
Great. And then I had just a follow-up question. Is there, an effort to get more women of color? Like, is this an intersectional sort of initiative, or okay?
Yes, of course, of course.
Great. Do we have any other questions then? And again, you can feel free to drop them into the chat box, or if you prefer to just unmute yourself, that's fine too on Facebook Live. Let me just check the comments. Any other questions for Karina and the Research Hers program? I'm just going to check Facebook Live feed.
I had a quick question. This is Gina. Great presentation, Karina. We could probably talk offline. I might have missed it. Was there like a competitive process? I see that there is, it looks like it was 20 to 25 students that'll be involved in that 2-week program, but I missed if there was like a competitive, like how are they entered into the program? And I know we're running behind, so if it's like a long thing, I can talk to you offline.
Yeah, we can talk offline. So actually the way that ACS and UCM are partnering together is ACS is funding this program, and all of the other logistics of, recruitment of students and everything is coming from University of Chicago Medicine, but we can talk offline and I can direct you to who we're working with
Okay,
at
great.
UCM.
Thanks, Karina.
Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Karina? I don't see any on Facebook Live. I'm just going to check the chat one more time. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Karina. We know that these pipeline programs and funding specifically for women to get this underrepresented group in research is just critical. And so thank you so much for that great presentation, and of course for all the work that you do. We really appreciate that. So next, I'm going to throw it to our panelists. I'm going to share my screen again. My goodness, I am having so many problems with just way too many things open on my screen today. Okay, there's my Zoom. Here we go. So I'm going to share our screen, and I'll let our panelists introduce themselves, but we have 3 fantastic panelists from University of Chicago Medicine who are joining us today and who are going to talk about their experience as women in the research and clinical fields. They come from, all different backgrounds, and they share they have different identities besides being women. So we're going to get some unique perspectives here. We have Dr. Anita Chong, Dr. Tamica Collins, and Dr. Ardaman Shergill. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I just wanted to introduce our panelists. I'm going to stop sharing our screen, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and just talk about talk about your work and what you do at the University of Chicago. And I will start with Dr. Chong.
Hi, thanks very much for this opportunity. I'm a transplant immunologist primarily, but immunologist in general. And so we're really interested in how the immune system works. We're interested in developing vaccines, and we have a very small project on developing some new drugs, testing some new drugs for pancreatic cancer. So I've been here for 17 years in the Department of Surgery.
Wow, thank you so much. And Dr. Collins.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamica. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at the University of Chicago, and I'm a researcher. So my research focuses on targeting cancer metabolism in BRCA-deficient breast cancer and triple-negative breast cancer. So I use mice and cells to kind of answer questions about how drugs work. So very early stage of drug development.
Thank you. And Dr. Shergill.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me join this panel and this wonderful event. I'm a medical oncologist. I see patients and do clinical research. So my research is clinical trials and bringing novel therapies to patients. And really that's what drives me to be in this field and do what I do. So I see patients with GI cancers. I also have a small population in lung cancers. And I'm interested in targeted therapies to a certain cancer pathway called the MAP kinase pathway. So that's where my clinical trial research work is mostly. In addition, I work for the Alliance, which is an NCI-funded clinical research organization. They also have national large clinical trials that are meant to be practice-changing and impact a lot of patients. Which also drives me to kind of bring this novel therapies and new approaches and improvement in cancer care for our patients.
Great, thank you. So we've got, I love the diversity of the different kinds of women in medicine that we have. This is great. So my next question for each of you, and we can just go in that same order. So, just give us a little bit of your background and what drove you to go into the clinical field or the research field. As we noted, this is a field where there just aren't as many women as men, right? And we're certainly making gains in increasing women representation in our clinical and science fields. But so yeah, just what drove you to go into this field in general? We can start with Dr. Chong again.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually, I grew up in Malaysia, which is almost exactly halfway around the world in a small country in Southeast Asia. And when I was little, you know, when I was growing up, we always every year had to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then we had in our tiny little library books of, you know, of different careers, like, you know, a scientist, a doctor, a veterinarian. And I just read a book about being a scientist, and I thought that that's what I wanted to be, even as a 10, 12-year-old. And then when I went to college, which was also in Malaysia, I recognized at that time, or I was introduced to the idea that, you know, in the tropics, parasitic diseases are rampant, and that there aren't a lot of, you know, ways to deal with it, because it wasn't a developing, it's not a developed world issue. It's really a developing world issue. And I personally have had parasites myself as a child. So I wanted to go into immunology, and but when I went to the West, you realize there are not a lot of opportunities to actually do parasitology. And so I went into immunology and did cancer research for a little while. And then sort of moved into transplants, because at that time, transplant was much more immunological, and there were, you know, a number of issues. But when I came over, I have to say there were very few women in science, and there were even fewer women who were not born in this country, and they're of not white complexion. So it was very, and it continues to be very challenging to be a woman in science, in the implicit bias and so on and so forth. You know, oftentimes, I mean, I grew up where you walk down the, you know, when you're in a meeting, everybody sort of recognizes you, but when you walk out in the hall the next day or even an hour later, and they don't see you. You don't, and I never know whether I'm supposed to come up and say, oh, hi, or you just say, sort of just kind of slink away and say, well, I wasn't memorable. And so there are these little things that, you know, over the years, you just say, you just have to be tough, right? You got to kind of suck it up. You have to do everything you can to stay in the game, and whatever it takes, you just stay in the game and constantly look for opportunities to validate yourself and find an opportunity. And I think that that is so important, is this sort of doggedness that no matter what, you are not quitting. And now the conversation's a little bit different, right? That women have a little bit more power, that there is the minority voice is more validated. But for a long, long time, it's just put your head down and suck it up, basically. And so I'm delighted and thrilled, you know, after 30 years or 40 years being in science, I'm still here.
Wow. Thank you so much. What a great example of how the unique perspective, right? Talking about how people in the West didn't study parasitic diseases because it's just not here. What an example of something that, again, your perspective of coming from Malaysia really plays into the work that you do and changing the narrative, right? And changing how we think about these things. It's so important.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Collins, same question. So again, just your background and what drove you to go into this field?
Right. So I am from the south side of Chicago. So I actually grew up right down the street, 70 in Cottage Grove. So, so I think growing up on the south side of Chicago, one of the things I saw was the diseases that affected my community. And I knew that from that, I really wanted to do something to change that. And so, you know, when I decided to go to college, I did pre-med. I was like, you know, I'm going to be a doctor because I have to fix what's happening in my community. And so, but somehow I end up being introduced to research. And it has stuck with me. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, I felt like it was a different way of connecting with my community and making sure I find drugs and treatments for, you know, cancer and things that affect the community that I am from. And so that's why I chose it. That's why I continue to do research, because I feel like, I'm giving to the greater good. I am, contributing to my community in a way that I can. And that's through science. And, and that's, why I chose this field and why I am still in this field. And, in terms of, again, being a woman in this field, it is definitely difficult, particularly being an African-American woman in this field is another level of difficulty that, I go through and other women go through that are African-American. And I think that, it's super important that, diversity and inclusion, people are now really focusing on diversity and inclusion. I'm glad that's happening, and I really hope that that continues to happen, because I need to see more people that look like me walking down the hallways in University of Chicago. So, and I'm committed to that, and I hope that everybody else is too.
Absolutely. And again, perfect example of seeing things that affect you personally that maybe other people don't experience, and then taking that work. I mean, you talked about how you do a lot of research around triple negative breast cancer, which predominantly affects African-American women. And without that voice, it just makes it that much more critical to have those voices in the room. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, Dr. Shergill, same question.
Perfect.
What drove you to go into the clinical field, the crazy world of medicine?
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant. I grew up in India, and my family immigrated a good 25 years ago. Growing up, I was always interested in science, the ability to ask why and find answers, and knowing that you don't know everything, and all that being okay was what suited to me about science and understanding things. So I knew that science was where I wanted to be in. I did do a lot of research, before I went to med school in different labs, and also epidemiologic research. I think the one thing I always was missing was talking to somebody one-on-one. I realized my strength is actually talking to someone one-on-one rather than, larger groups. And so I felt like, I was volunteering and talking to physicians at the time and volunteering in the hospital, and realized that's where I probably wanted to be at. And a lot of mentors all through life were in medicine and physicians, and doing various things, teaching, research, as well as seeing patients. And I felt that's what I wanted to do. It's not, it's a long journey, and it's not without its own challenges, whether it's, really from even family questioning your life choices, and you having to kind of provide answers of what you're doing when, or, colleagues, and I'm not saying, current institution, but, along the way, people who see you along the way, wondering why you're going which way, and trying to give you advice, really well intended, but that doesn't necessarily line up with what you want to do. So you can't help when you're kind of in that position and not accomplished to think, am I making the right choices? Am I along the right path? Is this the thing for me? But like Dr. Chong said, you kind of have to stay in it. And I'm still, at the beginning of my career, I think. So I still have to see what motivates you. I think if everything else is gone, what still motivates me? And that's my patients, really. I love my relationships with my patients. So everything for me is, I would trade nothing for that. Along the way, I've had a family, have kids, and you see how, that all that changes. But again, the core is still, I want to be there, helping my patients. That's what I want to do. I want to use my knowledge, everything that I have to help patients, help people. So that's kind of what brought me here. I echo both Dr. Collins and Dr. Chong's sentiments about, we have to represent our communities, we have to represent our gender, we have to represent all of our collective experiences and make it better. And when I see my daughter correcting me, I think the other day I said something about a gentleman, and she's like, or a gentlewoman. And I was like, okay, perfect. This is what we want. And so that is, we are moving the needle a little bit, I think.
I love that. I love hearing about that, right? Because you hear so much about, these younger generations are more quote unquote woke or whatever, but really they're more inclusive. And, for the most part, obviously I'm generalizing here. And so, like you said, you just keep continuing to move that needle. And since you are our, clinician on the panel, again, those personal experiences as an Indian woman, as an immigrant, when people come to you and form those relationships, it's so important to have your voice in the room as well, knowing that you're forming these one-on-one relationships with patients, and it requires, gaining their trust. And so, again, just having a diverse group of clinicians, or diverse workforce of clinicians, is just critical to making sure that everyone's getting the care that they need. So thank you so much for sharing that. So my next question is talking about some of the things that we touched on already here about facing barriers as a woman, right? What sorts of, and again, I think we can all acknowledge that things are getting better, right? We're moving in the right direction. Sometimes it feels a little slowly, but we are. And so just throughout your career, and again, I don't want to, you don't have to be like, at the University of Chicago, this person said this to me, but just in general throughout your career, whether it was, even in college or before that, what sort of pushback did you get about, maybe being a woman entering into the science space? Whether it's from friends, family, colleagues, or just what kind of obstacles have you faced in general? And we've touched on this a little bit, but I will start again with Dr. Chong. Just any sorts of barriers, obstacles, pushback that you've gotten about being a woman in science, whether professionally or personally.
It's so many, and yet not anything specifically. And it's hard for me to know whether it is of color or of gender, or perhaps a combination of the two. And I just feel right now, I feel that women's your success and your impact is always blunted for two reasons. I think that we as women, as in society, are thought to be more demure, that demure is part of who we are as a woman. And that in science, it is so necessary to promote yourself, right? That your work is important, it is impactful, it is better than, it's revolutionary maybe. And that internal conflict always makes women not use the most strong words to say what you have done and what you have accomplished. And I've talked to many women, and especially women, I think everywhere, but especially if you came from the East, where this difference is even more ingrained into you. And my husband, he was a white person, and he said to me when I was young, and he said, challenge authority. He says the most important thing you have to learn from the day you become a scientist is to learn how to challenge authority, because you come from a culture where not challenging authority is part of what is valued. And to be able to come to terms with these two conflicts and make it work for you is for me so this is like from yourself, right? Because it takes two. If you don't push, then you can't change. And the people that you want to change will not change. That you have to do this dance together, I feel. And to me, that was the hardest barrier, is to be confident and to push back.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And I, you brought up a good point. Sometimes it's hard to parse out, well, did someone treat me this way, because I'm a woman who spoke up and who used a strong voice, or, I've had those experiences too, where once someone literally said to me, you women never know when to shut up. This was in a work meeting, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, that's definitely a little sexist. But then you also have these other experiences. You go, well, I don't know, because it's so ingrained in what we do. I have a friend who's African American, and she says the same thing. She goes, I have to, parse out all the time. Was that racist? Am I reacting this way? Or, and just the constant struggle of not knowing how these identities form barriers and obstacles is, in and of itself, a huge barrier. So thank you for noting that. And
maybe just I would add something, because someone told me that when women ask questions, they always start to apologize. Like in a seminar, they'll say, "I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but did you?" Oh, "I'm sorry, and then once someone told me that, every time I notice it, and I also try not to say it. I just interrupt, and I try and listen to words that men use to interrupt, right? And try and be aware.
I love that. That's great advice. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Collins.
Yeah, so I have to definitely agree with everything that was just said, particularly with the confidence and being able to, speak up for yourself. My mom just told me this actually. She was like, you never recognize or say your accomplishments or speak about your accomplishments. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't. I don't speak about it, or it's not recognized, or I don't recognize it. And, there is this timid piece that, I definitely have of me that, that sometimes I don't speak up, or I have to force myself to speak up, because just being a woman, that sometimes you're looked at differently if you do speak up and say things, that are right, and also another thing, a barrier that I found was that people not knowing what I do and asking me things like, "Are you still in school?" or, or kind of, "What are you doing? Why are you not here? Why are you always so busy? Why are you in lab 7 days a week?" Things of that nature, that kind of like, helping people understand what I'm doing and why it's important, and, family members not understanding why I can't be there, so that's a barrier for women particularly, because they expect us to be present for things. And, I don't have any kids or children yet, but I can imagine adding that on will also make things a little bit, different for me. So I think those two things are barriers that I've faced.
Absolutely. I have a hard time thinking of people, a man who is working too hard saying, "Well, why weren't you there? You're at work," that kind of thing. Great example. Okay, and Dr. Shergill.
Again, definitely agree with both what Dr. Collins and Dr. Chong said. I think you have to train people around you to what to expect from you, what is possible. You can't drop things and be there. And that's a feature of being a physician as well as a researcher and having a career, and just training people to respect that. I had to start with my parents and my siblings and everybody around me, as well as, outside of that as well, in a professional manner as well. I think there was research from American Cancer Society organization a couple years ago, I want to say, where somebody did research to see how many physicians are introduced as Dr., whatever their last name is, let's say Dr. Smith, versus men. And there was a huge difference in introducing women versus men. And that's already kind of, undermining somebody. And so, I enjoyed reading that paper. I love that somebody brought that into light. And, it made me very mindful of how people introduce me and how I talk to other people as well. There's a tendency, maybe a familiarity with another woman, and I want to say their first name, and I catch myself. I think, both Dr. Chong and Collins mentioned a lot of the barriers that I faced as well. So I don't want to, I just wanted to bring another perspective of how we, even little things like introducing each other, we can promote. And I would say there's been wonderful women mentors that encourage me. I see them, whether it's personal life or professional life, I see them, and that motivates me. And both Dr. Collins and Dr. Chong's stories being part of that today, of what I can do better and overcome my barriers. And I see women doing it, and I have to figure out a way to do it too. This is not where it stops. So I would say I think that's been powerful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like you say, using doctor versus a first name may not seem like a big deal, but over time, I mean, that's certainly, I mean, I'm a woman, and I have found myself in my previous job. I remember I called a lot of the women doctors by their first name and a lot of the male doctors doctor. And one of my colleagues is like, "Did you notice that you do that?" And I didn't even notice, because it's not even it wasn't even so much a personal thing. I am a woman, but it's so ingrained in our culture, right? And so challenging those kind of norms, you know, it's not just like the work of men. It's on all of us, like you said, like, or noticing your daughter bringing that up and about a gentle woman. It's like, oh yeah, this is a societal, cultural thing that requires these shifts. So yeah, totally valid experience. Thank you for bringing that up.
Could I just say one thing, because
Sure.
it has made a big impact to me, was one of my colleagues at the end of an email, there is a quote from Golda Meir, who was the Prime Minister of Israel. And it says, "Don't be so modest. You're not that good." And I am, and I don't know why, for me, it was like the perfect push-pull to make me more like it's you have to do it because it's the right thing to do. You're not that good to be modest yet, right? That modest is actually not a good thing. And for me, it's so something to pass along if it resonates for you.
I love that. I love that. Oh man. And so this kind of builds on just my last question for the panel, since we're almost out of time here. So are there any quotes or pieces of advice or anything that you would want to say to a young woman clinician or researcher, or I mean, really anyone going into fields that are dominated by men? Any advice or little nuggets of wisdom that you would like to leave to any of our younger women viewers?
Yeah, well, I used mine already, but I feel that you know, affirming yourself, you know, like in science, it's so important to market your story. I mean, your scientific story, to spend time making it so that people connect and believe that it is impactful. First, you find a research project that you think is impactful. And then when you do what you do, sell it. Remember how important it was that and that salesmanship. My daughter, who's in marketing, said to me, everything requires marketing, everything. And you don't realize that. You sell yourself, you sell your research, and work at it. It's worth it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think for me, this was said earlier, but keep going, you know, and dream big. There's nothing that you cannot do, right? And just for me, I have to keep telling myself that, keep going, finishing your postdoc, keep going. Like the constant telling yourself, you know, you have to continue to keep going because, you know, it's bigger than me, you know what I mean? So, and keep that in my mind. And then also, you know, take some time for your mental health. Make sure you're, you know, make sure that you are dedicating your time to doing your work, but make sure you take time for you and make sure you're spiritually connected with yourself and things of that nature, because that kind of helps, you know, with the research. And, you know, if you are not right, you know, then you need to, you know, take some time off and focus on your mental health and come back to the research. It's going to still be there. It's not going to walk away. So.
Love it. Dr. Shergill?
Well, I would say, one, don't lose yourself in the process. You know, stay true to yourself. If you are a gentle person and you don't talk loudly, that's okay. You can sell yourself in other ways and use those as strengths for yourself. And then the second thing I would say is, I guess, you know, some time ago I was reading the book Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I remember that part where she goes to her guidance counselor and talks about going to Princeton. And the guidance counselor said, you're not going to get in. And she said for her, she remembers that so well because immediately her voice just turned off. There was like, she couldn't hear what she said because in her mind, she's just like, you don't matter. I'm blocking you, right? Use that as a power. We all have that voice in our head and we know which one to pick. You know, I tell myself so many times in a day, channel your Michelle Obama, right? Like block those negative voices. They don't matter. They don't know you. You know your path. You know your target. You know, keep going there. That's what I would say.
Amazing advice from everyone on this panel. So a huge thank you to Dr. Chong, Dr. Collins, and Dr. Shergill today. This has just been fantastic. We're getting so many great comments here. This is so inspiring. You guys are awesome. And so we're just so grateful for the work that you do and for, you know, paving the way for so many women who are going to come up in the clinical and research fields. We've got a couple minutes. Just if anyone has any questions, they can drop them into the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask if you've got any questions for the panel. I'm going to just monitor our Facebook Live and see if there's any questions coming in the comments there. Okay, don't see any comments on Facebook Live. Any other questions for our panelists then?
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to echo all the comments in the chat. This is just a wonderful, wonderful panel. Thanks so much to Aaliyah for always putting together such great webinars. Thank you to our speakers. And I mean, I do have questions, but we don't have enough time for all the questions. Because I try to do some kind of like pipeline kind of things. And I've been doing like some literature reviews around pipelines and not so much women, just, you know, like minority in general. And so, you know, we don't really have enough time to go into that. So maybe I'll chat with you guys offline. But one of the things that we were looking at is that, you know, we can get people into the pipeline, but keeping them there is sometimes very, very challenging. And so how do you, you know, stop that attrition and keep people in those pipelines? You know, we can get them in, but just those things that facilitate it. You know, some of you mentioned mentoring and people looking like you, but a lot of times that's just not there. So, you know, just looking at those kind of things. But again, we don't have to like do a round robin on that one, just, you know, something to kind of to think about. But I loved all the comments that you talked about. One thing that was interesting was Dr. Chong talked about unlearning how to, you know, to speak up. And I am going to ask a question. So I'm going to ask Dr. Collins. So Dr. Chong talked about unlearning things and speaking up, but I've worked with, and that's great. And that's good advice. However, as an African-American woman, sometimes when we speak up, we're angry Black women. So, or even worse words that we can't say on webinars.
Sure.
So like, anybody could have experienced it, but I just know as an African-American woman, and then like I said, I've been doing literature reviews around this. And a lot of times they say as an African-American woman, I pull back because the stigma is, you know, this or that, which is the converse of, like Dr. Chong talked about from, you know, her culture, they're being more timid. So that's the only question I'll ask. I've been rambling, I'm sorry.
Right. So is the question, how do I do that? Or
I mean, just have you experienced that?
Yes. You know, I think, you know, just in general, you know, African-American women just have this kind of, you know, I said what I said kind of thing, you know, and we just have that, but, you know, but at the same time, you know, I have, you know, thought about that, and sometimes, and that's actually hindered me. You know, so I'm just like, you know, if I say this, you know, then it's going to mess me up with X, Y, and Z in this person, you know. And so right now I'm starting to, you know, change that and just starting to be me. And whoever don't like it, that's their problem, not mine. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say what I have to say, and I'm going to live in my truth. And that's just it. But yes, I have experienced it. And yes, I have dialed back because of that. But I'm beginning to change that. I'm beginning to, like, you know, stand up and say how I feel and don't care what anybody thinks about it. Professionally, obviously, but.
Thank you. Thanks.
Gina, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's just, again, like Dr. Collins said, she has to do what she has to do, and it's on us to recognize our own like preconceived biases around that. So I'm glad that that's being brought up, because all of us have work to do on that, like I said, societally.
I would add, I think stay true to yourself. It's so much work not doing that. You know, I think we'll all accomplish a lot more. We don't have to be, you know, one way or the other. Just kind of just, you know, being who you are, being authentic you, and that would actually take some of the resistance off. You know, think of it as swimming. Like, take the resistance off, right? And it'll go faster and smoother.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, any other comments or questions for our panel? All right, once again, huge thank you to our panelists, Dr. Chong, Dr. Collins, and Dr. Shergill. You guys were amazing. You women were amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences today.